ability to find humor in things, not to make fun of, but to find humor in things, is going to be very closely connected to your ability to deal with the tragedies of life, the challenges of life, the difficulties of life. What do you do therefore? Well, you don't just sit there and hold on to your elbow and just, life is suffering and so therefore we die and life sucks. No, life is beautiful if you make it beautiful. If you fill it with beautiful things, it's like your house. You might have a really small, tiny house, but if you fill it with beautiful things, it's a beautiful house. If you fill a big, giant mansion with ugly things like modern art, it's going to be an ugly house. All of us are like that. Fill yourself with beautiful things, you're going to be a beautiful human being. Think about the kinds of things that we fill ourselves with, though. You know, it's easy for us to say, yeah, I fill myself with love. Well, what do you listen to? What do you watch? What conversations do you have? What kind of things do you hear? How much time do we spend filling ourselves with ugly things, but then somehow thinking that beauty will come out of it? Because if you could figure that out, you can shape yourself. You can form yourself into the kind of a person who can find beauty in everything, who can find a reason to transcend the sufferings of life, to be a person who can be like a beacon to people around you so that you're bigger than just yourself. Yeah, you're a positive figure in your own life, but you can also be a positive figure to the people around you, to your family, to your friends, to your community, without even trying to be. You're gonna find, I think, a lot of times that the people who try to be are usually the ones who don't quite measure up to that, because they're so caught up on the optics of it, of looking like they're the person who's the beacon, rather than just being the beacon. But man, finding the humor, finding the comedy, finding the positivity, because just like your math class, just like other tragedies of life that are far worse than your math class, although there aren't many, you have to go through it anyway. So you might as well find something funny out of it. You might as well find something humorous out of it. So I was asking first period this question, what's so funny? What's so funny? And I came up with was, well, everything. If you can look at it just the right way. I don't remember if it's in this class, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself. I was talking to one of my classes, I remember last week, and I was saying that, like, if you're in a math class, and you can't stand your math class for whatever reason, I mean, you gotta be there anyway. You might as well get something out of it. Are you ever gonna need to know that math stuff? I don't know, but I know that whatever it is that you're doing otherwise, you probably won't need either. In other words, if there's something that you're doing to distract yourself from the class, whatever that thing is, it's probably not going to be something that leads to your long-term flourishing and well-being. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if any of you are, when you're in your math class, you're secretly listening to podcasts about physics, or you're secretly listening to your podcasts about chemistry, because that's more important to you than math. Probably not. You're probably listening to things that, if I were to ask you an hour later, what is it that you're doing instead of learning math? It would probably be like a shoulder shrug. I don't know. It was just stuff to just pass the time. And I wonder how much of our time we can just pass the time in before we finally look back at a tragically wasted life. But if you're in a class, you got to be there anyway. You don't have to, but you've chosen to be there anyway. So if you're chosen to be there anyway, why not get something out of it? It's like going through suffering. You know, like I said before, life is suffering, but you got to go through it. So why not come out better on the other side? You know, if every time you're just like bored or disinterested, think about all of that collective wasted time that accumulates, and how many years worth of your life that accumulates there. If you go through suffering and you just kind of like hunker down and just say, well, I'll just survive it and, you know, come out the other end and then we'll see what happens afterwards. So think about how many missed opportunities there are to become better, to become stronger. If you convince yourself that certain things are just not funny, even if they are, but you can convince yourself that they're not, think about how many wasted opportunities you have to laugh. And it isn't a matter of laughing at people any more than it's a matter of laughing at yourself. But, I mean, is there any subject at all that's just not funny, that no matter what you do, there's no joke, there's no humor around it? I can't think of many. There's only a couple. There's only one subject I can think of that it's like the one subject I won't joke about. But that's it. Like everything else is kind of out there. I know some people have like 10 or 5, or some people have no limit at all. But what I would suggest to you is that your ability to find humor in things, not to make fun of, but to find humor in things, is going to be very closely connected to your ability to deal with the tragedies of life, the challenges of life, the difficulties of life. If you're, I was thinking, for example, I was telling last period this story that when I was at UCLA, I had this class. If you go to one of the UCs, they're only 10-week quarters. They're not full semesters. So like if you go to like San Diego State, it's like a 16-week semester. If you go to one of the UCs, except for Berkeley's on semester. All the other ones are on quarters. So it's only a 10-week quarter. So you'll go in the first day, the professor will typically give you like a reading list and say, read this book by this day, read this book by this day, and so on. And then they'll typically give you like a midterm and then a final exam. And that's your whole grade for the quarter. In some cases, you only have a final exam. There were several cases where I would get into like week 6 and week 7 of a 10-week quarter, and the professor would come in and say, I never gave you guys a midterm, did I? Nope, never did. Oh, shoot. Okay. I'll see you guys on Wednesday, and you'll have your midterm on Wednesday. I'm going to ask you a question. You'll write an essay about it. Just something about the course. That's all you get. You're like, oh, okay. But you know, if you've been keeping up on the reading, if you've been keeping up on the discussions, you're not worried about it. You come in and you just write a short essay, and that's that. In some cases, it's just the final exam. So I remember taking a final exam. I mean, it was one of those classes. It's the only thing in the quarter. And there was a guy sitting 2 seats down from me. We're at these tables. And you know that sound when someone's laughing, but they're trying not to laugh? And they kind of try to hold it in, and they look like a kettle that's about to explode because they turn red and they're trying so hard not to laugh, but they're still like letting out those dolphin noises. Like, and I look down and I want to know what's so funny. I'm like, what? And he just goes, I don't know any of this. I'm screwed. And he's laughing, and he's telling me, I needed this. Basically, he's telling me, I needed this class to graduate. I'm not going to pass. I have to come back next year and do it again. Because they only offered the class every other quarter. So it was going to hold up his graduation by half of a year, 6 months. And he's just laughing so hard because he's so screwed. For some reason, at that moment, it was funny to him. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, where you're so screwed in some case that you just can't help but laugh. It's like, what else are you going to do? The tragedy is going to happen anyway. Do you have to be so sad and miserable through it all? Or can you find something funny about it? Some kind of humor, some way to get through it? Because the thing that will get you through the tragedies of life is not the persistent feeling or thinking that you're going through a tragedy, or that things are so dark and miserable right now. Are things dark and miserable right now, or are they joyous? Yes. How are you going to see it? And a lot of times it really is a choice. It's not always a choice. But there's a possibility of finding something positive in it. But you have to find it and see what grows from it. And a lot of times it's humor. Humor is the thing that gets you through it. I don't know how many funerals you guys have been to in your lives, but man, funerals are hilarious if you approach them the right way. And not because you're laughing at the person who's dead, but because there's so much other things. There's so many little funny things are going on around it because it's such an absurd thing. A friend of mine, his grandmother died a couple of years ago, a few years ago actually, and every Mother's Day, they called her Mama C. Every Mother's Day I go and put flowers on her grave. I'm really upset that she died. I mean, obviously not as upset as she is, but I was really upset that she died because she was only 2 weeks away. She was over 90 years old. She was supposed to come in and talk to my classes. At 90 years old, she marched with Martin Luther King Jr. She marched with Malcolm X. You name any of those figures from like the civil rights movement, she was out there in the streets with these people. And I asked her, can you come and talk to my classes? And she says, absolutely. And I was all fired up. And like 2 weeks before she was supposed to show up, she died. I was like, there goes my lesson plan. But can you imagine like the kind of history this person had? She didn't even have a plan. She was just going to come in and start talking and say, hey, here's what I've gone through. And my students were just going to ask questions. But incredible human being, man. But I was at her grave yesterday. I was dropping off some roses for her. And I was just thinking about my goodness, isn't this just weird? Like you just show up to a piece of grass with a stone on it and you put down some flowers and then it makes us feel better? That's just weird. And it made me laugh a little bit. And then there was a guy who was right next to, a thing next to it, kind of look at each other, and the funniest thing happens. He looks at me, he goes, "This is kind of weird, isn't it?" And I go, "What's that?" He was thinking the exact same thing I was at exactly that same moment. Does that therefore mean that it's hilarious that someone died? No, but there's some kind of humor in it, and I imagine that the humor kicks in at times when the tragedy is just so overwhelming, when the pain is just so overwhelming. It's something that helps us to transcend all of that. You find something that gets you through it. Just like life is suffering. I've said that a million times, but what do you do therefore? Well, you don't just sit there and hold on to your elbow and just, life is suffering and so therefore we die and life sucks. No, life is beautiful. If you make it beautiful, if you fill it with beautiful things, it's like your house. You might have a really small, tiny house, but if you fill it with beautiful things, it's a beautiful house. If you fill a big, giant mansion with ugly things like modern art, it's going to be an ugly house. All of us are like that. Fill yourself with beautiful things, you're going to be a beautiful human being. Now, understand what I'm saying. Think about the kinds of things that we fill ourselves with, though. It's easy for us to say, yeah, I fill myself with love. Well, what do you listen to? What do you watch? What conversations do you have? What kind of things do you hear? How much time do we spend filling ourselves with ugly things, but then somehow thinking that beauty will come out of it? Now, of course, you can't go a whole life without absorbing some ugliness naturally, but my goodness, the whole part about the character, that's what I was asking about. Why is it some people can, will respond to things optimistically, some people respond to things pessimistically, even if they're siblings, even if they're raised in the same household? What is it about that some people will just rise up over things that other people just put down and quit in front of? So we could figure out, and it's easy for us to just say, people are just different. Yeah, but why? What's the it? Because if you could figure that out, you can shape yourself. You can form yourself into the kind of a person who can find beauty in everything, who can find a reason to transcend the sufferings of life, to be a person who can be like a beacon to people around you, so that you're bigger than just yourself. Yeah, you're a positive figure in your own life, but you can also be a positive figure to the people around you, to your family, to your friends, to your community, without even trying to be. You're going to find, I think, a lot of times that the people who try to be are usually the ones who don't quite measure up to that, because they're so caught up on the optics of it, of looking like they're the person who's the beacon, rather than just being the beacon. So, which is it? Is it a tragedy or is it comedy? And the answer is yes. It's what you're going to make out of it. What's so funny? Everything, if you look at it just the right way. But that takes intelligence. It's easy to feel the tragedies of life. It's difficult to think it through and see the comedy in it. That's why comedians are usually really smart. Talk to funny people, they're usually pretty smart. Funny people aren't usually very dumb. Those are the kinds of people who do dumb stuff and we laugh at them. But comedians are people who will typically observe something, and then they'll see it in a way that we all don't even realize that we see it, and then they'll present it in a way that we all relate to. You look at Fluffy. You guys ever see an interview with him? That guy's brilliant. His business mind is brilliant. It's unreal. I've heard him in doing interviews, not even about comedy, but like on business podcasts. He's a completely different guy from what you see on the stage. He's observing, he's thinking, and he's thinking in a way that can get to our feelings, to make us feel like we belong somewhere. We belong as part of his audience. We belong as part of his show. He's talking about us, even if he's not using your name. Songs, music that can connect with people, to make you feel like the song is about you, even if it was written 50 years before you were born. And so, using your brain, man, to think it through. Yeah, feeling the tragedy is easy, man. But man, finding the humor, finding the comedy, finding the positivity, because just like your math class, just like other tragedies of life that are far worse than your math class, although there aren't many, you have to go through it anyway. So you might as well find something funny out of it. You might as well find something humorous out of it. And after enough humorous things, you can't help but find yourself in a laughing life. That might be a good life. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Monday.